So in those failure event moments, you can stop there and you can kind of drown in your own pools of pessimism, or you can take the learning and lesson and apply it going forward. And when you do that, you propel yourself up to the next loop. And if you do that over and over and over again in your career and in your life, you become a successful person.
Welcome to the People Powered Solutions podcast. In this show, you'll gain expert advice and tips on building a thriving workplace culture with happy employees. I'm your host, Lorianne Duguay, and I'm thrilled to be spending this time with you today.
Hello, and welcome, listeners, to another episode of the People Powered Solutions podcast. This week, we are doing a pod swap. What's a pod swap, you ask? A pod swap is actually when you're on another person's show and you're a guest on their show, and the synergy is just so awesome that you say, you know what, wait a minute, I want to have you on my show. We're not done talking. I want to continue the conversation, but let's do it from my house next time, which is our podcast. So today we welcome Emily Sander. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you again. So why don't you share with our listeners, I see you as this executive leadership coach. You yourself were an executive for several years and then segued, ended up writing a book. How about you give our listeners a bit of a synopsis of how Emily got to doing what Emily does today and what that specifically is?
Sure. So at a very young age, I was born. Just kidding. So I am a former chief of staff turned executive leadership coach. So as you say, I worked for some mostly technology-based businesses. So Microsoft, Amazon, a series of startups.
Small.
Yeah, little small mom and pop shops. But yeah, I cut my teeth in leadership in those small companies where you got in early and then you scaled a global team from scratch. And I remember going, from the board of directors going, Emily, you're going to stand up this international client management team and you're going to have client managers in region, in EMEA, in APAC, in the Americas. And I went from that meeting and I typed into Google, like how to hire someone in the UK, because I had zero idea. I had never reviewed a resume, Lori. I had never done any sort of interview loop. It was like, okay, here we go. But that's pretty much been my career and my life in a nutshell. Like, I don't know how to do this, but let's jump in.
Absolutely. Dr. Google is always great for.
I distinctly remember that I was like, I don't know how to do this. But we got a fantastic hire there, I'm happy to say. So Christian Wheeler, if you're listening, thank you so much for being awesome and being you. So how I got into coaching is several years ago. I was in between jobs and I was about to start a new one. And I thought, what is my favorite part of my day? Like, what is the favorite part of every role I've had? And it was by far the coaching aspect. So like the mentoring, the guidance, and kind of working with people one-on-one. And so once I put that realization together with, oh, coaching is a thing, I was like, okay, if I can wake up and do this and have people pay me for it, that's a good life. And I can serve people and do meaningful work that way. So about just over a year ago, I transitioned to my coaching practice full time.
Love it. I absolutely love it. What I love about it is a lot of our listeners, I feel like we've got two cohorts of listeners. We've got our business people, our entrepreneurs, our CEOs, our decision makers who are looking for insight in terms of how they can restructure, for example, their existing culture and how they can improve on the experience they're offering employees. But similar to my book, the second cohort are people that might be feeling stuck themselves. So I like that really cool question that you asked yourself and shared with our listeners, that if you're feeling stuck and you're trying to figure out what do I need? What does that next chapter look like? How do I even start to design it? A great starting question is, what's my favorite part of the day in each of these roles? What are some of the tasks associated to that are filling my cup? And then how can I make a career? How can I figure out how to make money and make a living doing more of that? Not necessarily just that, but absolutely do more of that. And you did just that. And you've now segued into coaching full time. So over the past year, you've been working with, who are some of your clients?
So I'll save the names, but for confidentiality, of course. But
Absolutely.
I've
I
yeah.
mean, profile. Who is coming to you with what kind of problems? I probably should have been specific.
So their name and address is, are you ready? So basically, I work with chiefs of staff. So that's a big cohort of who I work with. So prospective or existing chiefs of staff who are trying to be more effective in the role. I also work with CEOs or other executives who have a chief of staff on staff and are trying to get the most out of that role for their organization. So that's a big chunk of what I do now because, as you said, I did write a book about it, and so people are naturally saying, "Oh, you were a chief of staff and you're now a coach. Can you coach me on chief of staff stuff?" So yes. And then my other kind of catch-all bucket is early executives to senior executives in career transition. So
Love it.
normally they just got a new job and they're like, I hustled and I tried, I interviewed, I got this job and now, oh my gosh, what just happened? What do I do?
So it's
Deer
like,
in the headlights eyes, please help me. Or they're looking for like, hey, I've been trying to move to the next level. I've been bumping my head. I've been getting rejected. Can you help me? Can you give me an outside objective assessment and observations? And then can you help me come up with a plan to get to the next level?
like it. Okay, so we're going to start with the first part, that first clientele. So your chief of staffs who want help with their chief of staff stuff. How about how about you share with our listeners what kind of stuff might that be, and what are some of the more common, I guess, challenges they're coming to you with, and maybe offer some insights of what are some quick fixes as a starting point before they can get to the deeper dive into some of those challenges.
Okay, those were three amazing and large questions. So let me try to
I
remember
know,
them.
right?
Oh my gosh, we'll do the meaning of life right after this too. I'm here all night. So, chief of staff, the first thing to know about the role of chief of staff is there's no one way to do it. So every single version or iteration of chief of staff is different. And so this can depend on the company size, the company stage, the makeup of the leadership team, what the company needs right now, and the chief of staff skill set. So let me make that more specific. So if you're working in a multinational company with tens of thousands of people, you will likely have multiple chiefs of staff supporting the CEO and the COO and the CFO, and maybe even their department heads and the VPs will have chiefs of staff. And so they'll be helping coordinate the different departments and also doing what's in their functional area. So that's one organizational chart. The other is like a startup, right, where you have maybe 10 people, and the chief of staff is also acting as pretty much the operational leader, and also acting as the recruiter and hiring, and also being the head of janitorial services. So it's kind of gap filling in all these different
Absolutely. And
places.
I like that you provided that kind of two extreme pictures, because I'm sure listeners are wondering, I only have 10 people. Does it make sense to even have a chief of staff, right? Is there a threshold where it absolutely makes sense to have a chief of staff and then where it's not really necessary? But what I'm hearing is there is no threshold. It just means that the nature of the job itself and the level of involvement they're going to need to undertake from an organizational level, the smaller they are, the more roles and hats they'll likely need to take on.
Likely, yes. And it might be, if you have, two or three people, I'd be hard pressed to say you must have a chief of staff. However, if you have 5 to 10, there might be an opportunity for, hey, Emily, we're going to scale exponentially. And so we are being thoughtful and getting some things in place beforehand, including maybe a chief of staff who, we're going to be recruiting and hiring, so specializes in that. Or we're going to be, maybe we have 50 people and we're growing internationally, and all of our people are going through culture change. And so someone who knows about change management and is able to help navigate our people through that is someone we bring on board. So the chief of staff is very dynamic and it's very flexible. When I was chief of staff, my job pretty much changed every 6 months, which was awesome because I get bored easily and I like the variety and I love learning about different areas of the business. But so to part of your earlier question, which is what are some traits? Adaptability. You have to be adaptable. You also have to be extremely organized with your time. You have to kind of take time management and just, master your time.
Blow it up. Yeah.
Basically supersize it, because you're not only doing your stuff, you're organizing other people's time and keeping other people on track. And so, and then another, kind of joke I say is I helped keep our CEO sane So sanity was important, and that helped everyone when he was operating at his best. So those are just a few of the things, a few of many. I can talk about more if you want, but
Absolutely.
it's
Um, no, it
cool.
sounds like it's a great start in terms of what are those unique attributes that make the difference
Yeah.
between subpar chief of staff and a great chief of staff. So adaptability and being stable, I guess, sanity. What I was
Yeah.
hearing, but having this ability, that tells me that having the ability to stay calm under duress, stay calm under kind of it's more chaotic environment, and understanding that part of your role is to ground the CEO as well, and to
Mhm.
help them kind of find that level playing field to tackle whatever challenge might be coming their way. So what are some of the common challenges that you get from some of your chiefs of staff that approach you for support in
So
coaching?
it depends if they have a relationship with their principal. So my principal was our CEO, and I had known him and worked with him several years beforehand. So we kind of knew each other's, idiosyncrasies and how we like to work together. It's challenging when you're brand new to someone. So you have a brand new job, it's at a brand new level with a brand new person, and it's a very visible job in the executive leadership team. And it might be if you're, a VP of, I don't know, operations, and a chief of staff comes along, and you're like, well, I used to talk to Lori, our CEO, directly. Like, why, like, what's this other person doing there? Do I have to talk to her before I talk to Lori? So it's a little bit of like, what are you doing here? And how does my role compare to your role? And how do we work together? So that's often a challenge in those scenarios. Sometimes it is a principal will bring their chief of staff along with them. It's kind of a package deal where, hey, I trust this person implicitly, and he or she is going to help me integrate this new team. You have a
So
question.
would one of the challenge, yes, sorry, one of the challenge that maybe CEOs would see OSs would be coming to you with is the fact that they're dealing and having to navigate that pushback in terms of helping organizations adapt to a new corporate structure, to a new executive structure. Do they sometimes have a bit of imposter syndrome when managing and navigating those emotions?
Sometimes, yeah, certainly there's that aspect, like who am I to kind of speak to the leadership team. There's also a lot of role definitions. So I have probably four chiefs of staff right now who the CEO brought them in because they're like, I need a chief of staff. You'll do chief of staff things. I'm not sure how we measure success, but like, come on, come in here and like do this thing. And so it's about defining their own role and then setting expectations with themselves, with their boss, and with the executive team about what they're going to be working on and how they're going to be helping. But it's really interesting. A lot of CEOs just want a chief of staff in there, which is fine, which is great. Some of them know that they need, for instance, someone to execute on their vision. So if they're like the ideas person, right? And they can see it. Maybe they're good at going to build relationships with partnerships or fundraising or whatnot, and they need someone to, hold down the fort. They know that they have these traits, and so they bring in a chief of staff that complements them well. But then they're like, and here you go, like you're in here, my job is done. So
Yeah.
we kind of help build out that scope of work a little bit more defined is one of the big challenges.
Yeah, and I imagine it would be a challenge also for the chief of staff to then kind of transmit that those expectations to the CEO and to help them kind of adapt to that. It's not just managing downwards, it's managing upwards ultimately, right?
Yeah. Information flow, that's a huge one. So you need to understand the core business system, and the bloodline of that, the lifeline of that is information. So you got to make sure information is going from the top down, right? So executives make a decision, great. Doesn't do any good if it doesn't get to your rank and file, mid managers, rank and file people. Similarly, if you've got, hardworking folks in, say, customer service, like your support center, and their feedback that they're hearing from clients is not getting up the chain, and leadership is unaware of that, that's also a problem. So you've got down, up, and then the last one is sideways or diagonal, where
Yeah.
instead of being siloed, and you know all about this, instead of being siloed, you're seeing across the board as chief of staff, and you're saying, okay, sales thinks that operations has this, operations thinks finance has this, the ball is going to drop, we need to coordinate amongst ourselves. Or like, hey, Emily, you're manually entering that from what you wrote down on your napkin. We're going to get that into Salesforce, and they coordinate that with other people, because so and so is doing this over here in a more robust way. Your napkin piece might have worked when you were a startup company and you had 10 people, but now we need to change our processes and
systemize. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to systemize, automate, create more seamless
Yes.
documentation and flow, and facilitate that flow of communication. Okay, awesome. So we now understand what a COS is, what a chief of staff is, generally what are some key attributes for the chief of staff in terms of what makes or breaks it in success wise. We also understand some of the challenges that they're contending with on a regular basis, which is super helpful for listeners who might be considering whether or not chief of staff would be a good fit. I'm also hearing from some of your observations that a lot of CEOs kind of jump the gun and they'll say, I need to see a chief of staff for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it's just to kind of get that check mark, like, I think we're at that level now where we should add this role without putting too much forethought into what that role might be taking care of on the job and what their scope of responsibilities might be, but also to kind of say, okay, I'm hiring a chief of staff so I can be done and go work on the business, not in the business so much, is what we're hearing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to say, like, I'm not knocking people for bringing a chief of staff on. It's like, bring a chief of staff on, make that decision cool, and then also set them up for success.
Oh my God.
Whoa, jinx. Here we go.
That was...
But yeah, and it's funny because a lot of CEOs intuitively, they couldn't even articulate it, but intuitively they know, I need to spend my time over here now. I need to step back. Or maybe I need to step into, let's say a CEO has a product background and they're launching a new product. So maybe they need to spend more time in that area and the chief of staff holds down the fort. But yeah, I mean, I'll give you like some quick examples because I know we kind of define that, but Emily, like so what does the chief of staff actually do? Here are some examples. So we needed a middle management layer. We had one VP who had like 57 people reporting to her. And we're like, that's too many people. And so we created the role of operations manager, and we hired 4 people from within, and they knew the customers, they knew the products and services. None of them had managed people before. So we hired these 4 people from within, and then we had to train them on how to be a manager. So that's something that I got to work on, which was fantastic because I love that stuff. I also took over the operations, so kind of the P&L responsibilities of a $2.2 million subsidiary for about 18 months. So that's kind of gap filling, which a COS does. That's a huge gap. It was for a long time. But until we could find the proper replacement, I was on point for that. And then I also did a little bit of our corporate marketing to gap fill for that. So those are just like, that's just a teaser test or a handful of stuff I worked on, but that's the kind of things that chiefs of staff can help with.
Absolutely. And it's helpful for our listeners to understand who might be contending with exactly those kind of that gray. They're not really sure what could help them. And it sounds like a chief of staff might be a great option if they are, in fact, navigating those kinds of waters. So that was our first cohort of your typical clients. I loved your second cohort too, because I feel it's an underrepresented group of leaders, if you will, when we talk about aspiring and newer leaders, those who I feel like a lot of the leadership development coaching, the executive coaching, the leadership development programs out there are really geared to that more seasoned leader. There's not a lot to support and help set those newer leaders up for success, and not a lot to coach them and to help them really. You can groom them into that perfect leader if you offer them coaching early on in their journey. And my own leadership development, I think we talked about it on your program, my leadership development program. That's why I added that coaching component, because too many of these leadership development programs are one and done. Oh yeah, I've taken a leadership training program. Yeah. It was 3 days, or it was 2 weeks, or no, it needs to be a 1 year supported training program where you're having monthly modules where you get maybe a live webinar. There's some self-reflection, so you're increasing self-awareness in that leader. And then there's also coaching. So not only can they come to these aha moments, they get these mini challenges where they can apply it in the workplace, but then they get to kind of debrief with a coach to say, so I tried this and that didn't go so good. And that was it. So I feel like, so they can really talk things out and definitely plan to improve and come up with the actions, the activities that will in fact enable them to continuously hone these leadership foundational skills.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. And I would say that, clients have provided feedback that at the end of sessions, they either leave with new knowledge, a new perspective, or they feel more refreshed, like more, okay, I can more settled about something, right? Which are great, great feelings. But a lot of what I do is we'll have like an overarching theme, like, hey, how do I go from an operational doer to a more strategic thinker and leader? Like, okay, that's our arc, right? But every time they come to a session, it's, what's a meaningful topic for us to discuss today. It's like, Emily, I have this personnel issue and I have to have these tough conversations. And so it's like, okay, let's talk about this. And it's an example of how to go from an operational doer to a strategic leader. And then next week it's, hey, I have to lead my first team meeting. Can we talk about how to do that? Or, oh, we're rolling out new performance reviews. Like I need to get my managers, maybe I'm a manager of a manager for a first time now too. I have to learn how to roll that out to them. So you have these little moments and these specific scenarios where if you are working with someone for a year, you can talk to them about it. And the other thing I'd say is almost all my clients go, I like that you get business and you understand what I'm talking about when I bring these things up, but I like that you're not in my business. So I like that, it's not going to get back to so-and-so in the office. I can be very candid with you and not pull any punches. So that's helpful to people too.
Absolutely. 100%. And I think that's maybe one of the pieces that a lot of folks don't understand about coaching, because we are not necessarily in the business. It means, and if you look at, sorry, let's draw this back. If we look at what that coaching conversation is about, I always start any coaching session with, I can show up for you two ways today. I can show up for you as a coach, and that's where you're going to do a lot of the heavy lifting, but I'm here to really kind of guide you with some powerful questions to help you uncover your own solutions and you come up with some strategies. Or I can show up for you as a consultant, which is an entirely different hat, where I will provide advice and advising. But really, I think the more valuable of the two in that moment is that coaching conversation, right? So I always start the same way as you with, we've got 30 minutes together, we've got 45 minutes, whatever the case may be. What is it you'd like to what is it you need to walk away with today?
Yeah.
Find that one question helps them really hone in on this. I need to have some strategies or solutions by the time I leave this to address this, or I need to have found my voice, and at least have an idea of how to start finding it.
Yeah. What do you want to walk away with in 45 minutes? Oh, okay. Yeah. Let me zero in on that.
Helps them. And I used to do this for like an hour and a half, and I found that an hour and a half gets way too all over
That's a long time.
Yeah. With a leader, the more you can make it a concise session, and for our listeners, same thing with your employees. The more you can make it a concise coaching session with them, if you're having that coaching conversation, the more they're going to leave out all this detour, non-related, somewhat irrelevant information, and they'll really cut down to the chase and give you just what you need for you to formulate some powerful questions and help them uncover some of their solutions.
And when you were talking about that, sorry, it just reminded me of all over. I've seen people give feedback where they get kind of lost in a corn maze, like in a verbal corn maze. And they're like, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm just saying words and I'm feeling awkward. I have to fill the silence and I'm going to talk about you and this. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So, especially when you're giving someone feedback, which is a great thing for a leader to do, keep it short, because the person's going to try to be picking up what you're laying down. And if you're scattershot in 12 different areas, they're like, I don't know what the takeaway was. Oh, you want me to, use less words on my slides and then speak at a higher level to our clients. Got it. Okay. Will do.
Perfect. That I can action. Absolutely. Yes. And it's funny when you say, I'm going to fill the silence here because it's really awkward. And that is such a knee-jerk reaction. And I would say in my early coaching days, that was me. I was like, it's quiet. Wait a minute. Maybe they didn't understand the question. Let me just ask it 7 different ways and add some clarifying comments. But ultimately, the most magical thing happens when you let that silence do the heavy lifting.
Yes. Love it.
And just sit in that silence and provide the space they need to really get into that reflection that will lead them to those aha moments to work on Isn't it?
Holding the space can be
Yes.
really powerful. I mean, it's a cliche, but hold the space. And also, if you can become really comfortable with silence, that's power. Like that's powerful. If you are the one who's like, we're just going to sit here. And I'm like, you feel awkward and you might be feeling the silence, but I'm fine. I'm perfectly fine.
Yeah. And to normalize it, you can tell them. I usually, when you're framing that conversation at the beginning, it's okay to say, hey, if you need to think about this stuff a bit, just sit here and think. We're good. There is no, I'm not here to push you into answering whatever without you having had the time to think about it. Take the time you need, and then let's move on. So, sorry, go ahead, Emily. You were going to say
No,
something?
I'm so sorry. I was just gonna say that's one of the huge benefits of coaching is you have a dedicated time to think, right? Like when do you have time just to think and have someone trying to help you? I've had people say, look, you're the only one I can talk to because, my team members, I'm the founder, I'm the CEO, and my spouse for whatever reason like just doesn't get business. So like you are the person this hour in the week is when I can talk about this. And I'm like, okay, yeah, absolutely. So it's a big responsibility and it's a privilege to help people in that way. But yes, I love all of that.
Absolutely. And you get to, like, seriously, listeners, for those who are feeling stuck, you get to be their person for that hour. How cool
Mhm.
is that, right? So again, just validation that taking the time to think about what was filling your cup and then figuring out a plan to do it more. You get to now be someone's person every hour of the day. I feel like that's kind of a great place to be. We alluded to, and thank you for just deep diving a bit more into that second cohort of clients, but also for then segueing into this wonderful conversation about the benefits of coaching and providing some very specific little tips and strategies for managers and leaders who might have to take on, and they might not have, they have to learn to get comfortable with that coaching conversation and definitely helping them out by providing tips and insights, for example, about the silence and letting it do that heavy lifting. You did allude to books earlier, and I do see some said books in the background. So why don't we start to chat about what listeners can expect from these books? Is there one of the two that you'd like for us to tackle? Because I know I want to be cognizant of time. We're about, I guess, a good 25 minutes in. So in like 10-15 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote a book on Abraham Lincoln and it's called, no, I'm just kidding.
Oh.
That's by John Meacham. I highly recommend. And then there was light. So Abraham Lincoln is like my hero. And and John Meacham's one of my favorite books. So that's obviously not mine, but I would highly recommend it to any leader. Mine are over here on kind of the lower level because my first book is called Hacking Executive Leadership. And if leaders are listening, it has a whole bunch of frameworks that help. So it's not, in this specific scenario, you want to do this, this, and this. It's, hey, here's a framework for making better decisions. Or here's a framework to rethink about failure. And so you can progress at a higher level. Those types
I'm
of
going to
things.
stop you really quickly.
Yeah, do it.
Because obviously, I want to know more about those really quick. If you had to describe both of those two frameworks really quickly, well,
Really quick. Decision making, 3 circles framework. It works like this: circle 1 plus circle 2 equals circle 3. Circle 1 is an external event, something that happens, email, something that happens in a meeting, whatever. Circle 3, so you jump to circle 3, that's your desired outcome. So, okay, something happened. What do I want to have happen here? Asking and answering that question is a key piece. And then you can reverse engineer into circle 2 and say, what do I need to say? What do I need to do? What do I need to not say and not do to get myself to circle 3? And so you can use that in the moment, like if you're trying to lead a team meeting and, Joe over here gets unruly and starts, oh, this is unfair and no one listens to me. Okay, well, that's circle 1, right? That's the external event. What do I want to have happen here? Calm Joe down, get the meeting back on track. That's circle 3. Okay, so in circle 2, I might need to acknowledge Joe, and I hear you're upset, and what you're talking about is really important. That's actually on the agenda for the back half of our meeting. So I want to kind of set the table for people and then get to that. Boom. So 3 circles. There you go.
I love it. Sorry, I'm stopping you there too. Look, you were going on again, and I'm such a pain in the butt with that. But do you also know that your framework is 100% applicable? That's how you conduct mediation?
Yeah. Oh,
For our
yeah.
listeners, right? I'm a certified mediator, and that's exactly how we do it. When I'm working
Wow.
with the parties involved, we start with the end in mind. We say, okay, we start by saying, what are some of the issues? What are some of the events that have led to us being here today? So that both can feel heard, or if it's three, or I've
Yep.
mediated between up to 8 parties. And then once we okay, everybody's defined that. Now what's that ideal state? What is
Mhm.
it that we would love? Like, what does that look like? And have them describe it, and then say, okay, how do we take where we're at today to get what needs to happen for us to get to where we want to be in 3 months from now? So what are some of that very tactical pieces, and then what are some of the shared commitments we're going to uphold as we navigate towards that? So your 3 circle works there too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't know that. So straight from who knows. And the two things I would say are a lot of people just skip defining what they want, right? They're just like, rah, like they just are angry or they have emotion. It's like that's the end of the story. It's like, well, like toward what? Like what are you trying to do? The second piece, the key piece to 3 circles is sometimes in circle two, you have to do things you don't feel like doing. I might feel like yelling back at Joe and be like, yo, buddy, we've talked about this 12 times. Why are you bringing this up right now? But that's, to get to circle three and to step up as a leader, we do something else. I had someone gave that example to someone and they're like, Emily, gosh, like, is there a secret circle four where we can take Joe out and punch him in the hall? And I was like,
Mm,
3 circles does not advocate violence, but I give you credit for trying to be creative. But sometimes we have to do things as leaders that we don't feel like doing for the greater good.
the
Yeah.
greater good of the group. Absolutely. I love that. I love the 3 circles. Super helpful. Start with one. What's the event? What's happening? And then skip to 3, which I always love if I can skip the line. Skip to 3 and say, what's that desired state? What's the ultimate outcome? What's the take home? And then work on number 2. How do I get there? Okay, that's framework for decision making. Newly understanding now that it's also for mediation and navigating more difficult conversations. Now let's skip to your second framework you alluded to.
Yes. Okay. So that's the failure loop. So we're going to rethink failure. So if I say you failed, what is the first thing that pops into mind?
I
For
suck.
for the majority of people, it's a negative connotation. It's not a good place to be. And so failure loop is I have a graph in the book, but I'll explain it briefly. It's a chain of loops that are connected, and the overall chain goes up and to the right. And up and to the right is the direction of progress. So that's how you get better. You'll note that in one part of an individual loop, you're going back down and to the left, right? So you're looping all around. That is what we typically think of as a failure. I went to the board meeting and I'm totally messed up my section and I got flustered on the questions. I made a decision to start my own business and it failed. And so now I have to admit to myself and my friends and family that I'm a failure. So in those failure event moments, you can stop there and you can kind of drown in your own pools of pessimism, or you can take the learning and lesson and apply it going forward. And when you do that, you propel yourself up to the next loop. And if you do that over and over and over again in your career and in your life, you become a successful person.
Love it.
The quote I love to go along with this is, I'm successful because I'm willing to fail more times than you even try.
Oh, is that an Emily Sander original?
No. Oh gosh, no. Yeah, someone smarter and like a lot better at this stuff than I am. But I was like, ooh, that just
Oh, I
hit
like
me
that.
like in the feels when
Love
I
that.
first heard that, right? I was like, wow.
Absolutely. And I think there's some failure is harder for certain personality styles. And I'm pretty sure we touched on disc and everything disc. And I'm pretty sure I bring it up in every episode because folks, this is how passionate I am about these game tools. But there's certain styles that for them, failure can and should be avoided with proper planning, right? While for other styles, my own style included, failure is all part of the process. And that I don't
What
even
style
like,
are you?
I'm an ID.
ID. Okay, I'm like a high C with a little bit of D in there. So like for me, sorry to
Yeah.
jump in there, but like for me, being wrong in front of people, that was a huge, huge fear for
Yeah.
me, right? So
You're
it's
the
like I
style,
didn't.
the C style are those who
Mm,
failure for them is a very difficult thing to navigate.
failure publicly because I didn't prepare. Ooh, ooh, yeah, bad. but
See,
learning
and
to see it for what it is.
for me, I don't even like the word failure because it's just a non-success.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, it's a non-success. So what I'm hearing is it seems like a great framework to help teams understand and normalize the value of non-successes, to say that, hey, what did we learn from this? What is it that we probably shouldn't repeat moving forward? And how can we grow our approach? What did we learn that we need to repeat moving forward, right?
And if you're a leader, start with yours. So if you're leading a team meeting, you're like, hey, we're going to be more open about, failure. We're going to talk about what we learned. Start with something that you failed with. And people are like, oh, they know that. And they're a human too. Okay, here's mine. And if you kind of do a little, celebrate, okay, great. Good job failing and good job learning. That just totally changes the dynamic with it.
I love it. Yeah. And I am 100% on board and a champion of creating that culture that recognizes and embraces failure, because no great innovation happened from getting it right the first time.
Yeah. I mean, perfection, number one, is boring. And number two, doesn't exist. So you might as well throw that out the window, right? So
yeah,
make progress over perfection. That's
progress over perfection always, and fail forward forever. Yeah. Hey, these are your two frameworks. Anything else you want to add on that second framework before we move on to chief of staff?
I mean, I work with clients to they almost look forward to that mixture of like anxiety and excitement and failing, because they know that's what makes them better. So if you think about it today and you're terrified, like, I don't want to touch that with like a 10-foot pole, understand that you can change your approach to that and actually look forward to these opportunities. And I'll tell you, I mean, really quickly, I was terrified of being a podcast guest, let alone host. I was terrified. And my first publisher made me get on the podcast circuit and talk about my book. And the content was decent, Lori. The delivery was questionable on some of my first episodes.
I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I feel you're so comfortable and it feels like I'm just bantering with an old friend. I don't believe it, but okay, we'll take your word for it.
I kept them. So you go to my website, go to the media page and scroll all the way down, and you read the transcripts of those. The content,
don't listen to the delivery, cool. Just read the transcript.
Yeah.
That's kind of how my kids are with me singing. They're like, Mom, you should just lip sing. Never mind actual delivery. You should just lip sing.
And no, not for you. Not today.
Awesome. Okay, that's super insightful. Now, really quickly, your next book, because we are way over time, but I knew we would go here. Chief of Staff.
An insider's perspective to the chief of staff. So how to be a great one and why you need one. So basically, if you're like, what is this chief of staff thing you speak of? What is it all about? How can I use it? Just a good overview and some ideas. Get the book. I've gotten feedback that the most popular part is the tactical and practical pieces in the back half of the book. So here's how you set priorities. Here's how you would take notes. Here's some ideas for how to structure that. That kind of stuff is here's how you have that tough conversation. Those are like money for people. So if you want an overview of the chief of staff role, get it. And if you just want to know some tactical and practical pieces, get it and jump to the back half of the book.
There you go. And tactical and practical is 100% my jam. I like where if I'm going to spend my time or invest my time into reading a book, into listening to a podcast, I want to be walking away with something. It's horrible. Yeah. It's that what's in it for me mentality. It thrives everywhere in the world. It is what it is. If you're going to invest, you need to know that you're getting something out of it, be it, good feels or just, or actual tactical, practical strategies. So it sounds like you have provided our listeners with a ton of those today and a ton of great insights. So thank you, Emily. I'd like to share where, of course, we're going to have this all in the show notes, but if they want to continue the conversation, if maybe you've piqued their interest and they like to continue discussing how maybe a chief of staff could serve them or just want to just chat with you, how do they connect?
The easiest place is my website. So it's www.nextlevel.coach. So next level, all one word, .coach. And you have everything there. You've got the books, you have the link to my podcast. I've got some free downloadable resources, social media handles. So you can all find it there at nextlevel.coach.
Sounds like a one-stop shop hub of all things Emily Sander. And it also means that if you scroll all the way down, folks, listen to those earlier guesting
Oh
episodes.
boy, yeah, on that media page. I kept him. I kept him. Thanks,
So
Lori.
thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me to continue our
It's been
conversation.
a pleasure. Love it. Love our pod swap. We should keep it going.
I know we always have great conversations. And listeners, thank you all for tuning in. I do challenge you, as I do every week, to take everything you've heard today and write down at least one thing you can put into action the minute you're done listening, and then go do that.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us for yet another enriching conversation. To hear more about today's guests, make sure to check out the links in the description of this episode. Want to continue the conversation? Then head on over to our social media platforms, all of which are also linked in the description, to keep it going. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to make sure you don't miss another valuable episode.